Hello, everybody. This is Slavi Younger Nightingale here from Fräsch. I think you guys are used to seeing my face on our little platform. If you're new to us, if you don't know, Fräsch is an acoustical manufacturer located outside of Dallas, Texas. We make products for ceiling, walls, dividers, and also acoustical lighting. I am so excited about what we're doing today because it's a little different. We've decided to kind of let you know and introduce you to some of our favorite folks. And one of my most favorite that I get to talk to in business world is Dr. Sue Ann Highland. So Sue Ann Highland, she has so much experience, crazy long number of letters behind her name. But she is amazing because she will take everything she knows and breaks it down to why and how it works in real world. So the official title, she's a national education strategist, industrial organizational psychologist for school specialty. Right. So her background, and she can tell you a little bit more about this. I definitely want her to, but just really quickly, she has 30 years in academia as a teacher, as a curriculum builder, as a administrator, and then moving to the corporate world, right? And this is kind of, Sue, thank you for coming. This is what I would love for you to talk about, right? You're on the corporate side of the world. As we know, school specialty, which I love what they say, which is if you turn school upside down, everything that falls out, they actually provide, right? So their span of what they can do is impressive. And I would love to, Sue Ann, as an introduction to you, a little bit about your background, and a little bit tell us about how does your background inform the decisions that you help schools make about what the environment's supposed to look like, what is just a fad, what really makes a difference.
I am, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I adore Frosh. I love being here. And the reason my background makes a difference is I'm so blessed to be able to come to with all of my great partners and come to schools and say, okay, here's the latest, greatest research. Here's what the research says about how kids learn, how we teach, how we process information. And now, how can we apply that into the environment? And like you said, we don't want to look at just what maybe a fad is, but what's going to have longevity because we want to be good stewards of money too. We don't want something to go in that's going to last for 2 years, 3 years because we know that buying cycle is so long. And I just get the great opportunity to work with my partners within school specialty, with our vendor partners like yourself, and be able to come and just translate a school district's dream of what they want into the reality of what we can bring for kids and teachers.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I imagine there's kind of two categories, right? Sort of overcoming sometimes well, we've always done it this way, right? So this is where your information comes really handy. Well, that's great, but when we know more, we do, when we know better, we do better kind of a thing,
Right.
right? And so, hey, this is really not the choice because long term it's not gonna uh, survive, right? So I think combining all that, like bringing what we know, what the academic world knows, and what we know about the brain, and really bring it to everyday, function, real world stuff. I think that's absolutely amazing. This is why when Sue Ann and I get on the phone, we can't hang out because we
So true.
start philosophy. You know what I mean? So that's very, very true. So, the part that, we obsessed here at Fräsch about is sound, right? And soundscape, and really what sound, how dramatic of a difference can sound make in spaces, how we feel, our well-being, and things like that. And, I would love for you to talk a little more about how that goes specific to schools, because, as we've talked, I've learned quite a bit from Sue Ann, how much more dramatically it affects the younger the kids are, right?
Absolutely.
And how can it influence, their education, their performance, but even really growing up as a healthy kid. So how do you go about, figuring out what the room should do, what the design can do for it, and how sound fits within that?
Well, I think sound is not something that when we go to school to become a teacher, it's not something that we really talk about because really we rely on that hardscape environment to do those things for us. But we know, looking at research, that if I were to be at the front of a room and I'm talking to the back of the room, by the time that sound carries all the way to the back, it's really a lot less than what it is, and or what it came out as. And when you look at the hardscape itself, we've got buildings, depending on the place in the country, that are maybe even made fully out of brick or fully out of concrete because of weather, things like that. And we know that that reverberation really does so differently in different spaces. That's why when you go into someplace like a media center, it really does feel different to your ears. I had a student come into a space that we were working on, and I had one of your beautiful huts up and the spot. And I had a student say, "Well, what is that thing?" And he walked in and he immediately, his shoulders relaxed, and he looked at me and he said, "Wow, I can think in this space." And it was so neat. I mean, that's just a neat dramatic example of really what the difference in feel can be. And we all know, you go into a gym or you go into a large
Mm.
space or into a concert venue, and how does that feel? It feels very different. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that story about a little kiddo, right? Because it kind of really clarifies that this is not a learned thing. Like with age, you kind of have preferences. This is so deeply embedded that when there's not all that noise that you feel like you are ignoring, but yet your body's still responding to, when that's not around and you get that break, how different even a child knows that he doesn't know why, but he's like, whoa, I feel different, right?
Absolutely.
It's really amazing, that you can do that. So, what, how do the adults, when you kind of show them these things, respond? Are they also kind of see like, is this sort of an aha moment? Yeah, we didn't maybe consider these things as much beforehand.
Well, let me give you a real life example. I think sometimes we don't necessarily realize that it is sound, or, it's something that's a little intangible, because sound is very intangible, right? But we were approached by a music teacher, and this music teacher came to us and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm losing kids out of my program every year because of hearing loss, because
Oh
of
my
hearing
gosh.
concerns." And, a band program, of course, is loud. My own daughter plays a few instruments, and I know how that is at home when you've got all of that noise. Imagine even a medium sized band, 25, 50 students with all of those instruments at the same time. And he said, "I don't know what it is, but I keep losing students." So, of course, as we start thinking and start talking, that's when we engage someone like yourself, because we're going to actually measure that sound. We're going to tell them, "Oh, wow, you know what? That decibel level's so high when the students are in here playing." Of course, no wonder. You've got in a band program, for example, you've got students, oftentimes you'll find that drummers will wear earplugs, so that way,
Hmm.
that sound, even though they can hear the other instruments, it dampens that noise, so that way it doesn't hurt their hearing. But that's a little bit different than a regular classroom. But you will see the teachers, when they experience it themselves, just like the student. They just kind of
Hmm.
relax, and your shoulders go down. And imagine if you were a student who had sensory problems and concerns where they get overloaded with too much noise. Sometimes you'll
Hmm.
see students walking around with headphones on, because then that helps dampen that sound. Imagine what all of that input all day long does to a student. It wears them out. It makes them, a little upset, maybe a little nervous. By being able to control one additional factor, it's one more thing that we take off their plate.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's really impactful, seeing how we can really environment can change that. As living in this world, you always knew like, hey, the teachers would put other like the troublemaking kids closest to them because they do better. And I always thought like, oh, because teacher can see them better and things like that. But look, doing a research, finding out that that's really only place really close to the teacher, if the room isn't acoustically appropriate, is where you can listen without struggling. And that struggling is, you, especially when you're young, using all your working memory just to fill in the holes,
Yeah.
trying to understand what's going on, is very, very, it's exhausting, right? It's exhausting. And then couple that with something that you've touched on, which is sensitivities, right, to sounds and things like that. Where if you look at any of the research, it's really sort of like their system just absorbs everything too much. So imagine that, right? So not having place to escape, you eventually, yeah, like you said, it's almost like this fearful, scared animal,
Right.
right? Like because it's like so much, and you don't have a release valve, right? So as we're talking about people in school, we cannot overlook the teachers, right? So when Sue and I talk about, we can't, she taught me one thing which I love, which kind of helps me frame how we look at things, which is schools care about kids' performance and well-being, and teachers' retention, and those kind of go together, right? Teacher, you need well-skilled, happy teachers in order to get the first two, right? So let's talk about how teachers are affected by the environment and sound within the environment, and what that might do for retention.
Well, I mean, if you think about just today's world, we've gone through some really big things in the last couple of years. I mean, we've all experienced COVID. It was a shared experience. We've got so many additional things that are going on right now that our teachers are tired. They're just tired. They want so badly. I always tell everybody that I still present myself as an educator because I am. And the one thing that you will find about every educator in the entire world is it's not just a job they do, it's really who they are. And I always say that it's at the very core of our being that we are teachers, that we're educators. We want so badly to see kids happy, healthy, successful kiddos in whatever they want to do. And when all of these other blocks and barriers come up, and, we've got already, of course, concerns every day because we want to bring kids what they need. But you layer
Hmm.
in other things that happen that you don't have control over. And it's just, again, that additional stress. So I've really been talking to people about how can we utilize space in its entirety to help retain and recruit teachers. How can we even give them maybe a little space? One of the greatest trends I see is reworking teacher lounges. Uh,
Oh
So
yes,
it's
I love that.
yeah,
Tell me about
so it's not just
that.
even, I mean, my poor teachers, there were some buildings that I was in, and it was a foldable table and folding chairs, and it was just the saddest environment. But
Yeah.
how can we create a space that's comfortable for them, that gives them a chance to unwind and breathe and relax? And controlling that sound definitely can be a part of that. Give them a chance, just like that student, to walk into a space and just let it go. Just relax.
Let go. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know. Hearing you talk, I was thinking, and I really actually haven't thought about this before, is that they're actually on,
Yeah.
right? Like all day long, they're in
And
charge of all these little humans, and they don't get to just relax, right? They are playing a very specific role.
yes.
So not having that hour or 30 minutes in a day where you can really just be like, my brain can like let go. I can, eat my lunch and talk with grown-ups for a minute with that is not at a folding table with overhead lighting and a echoey room. I can definitely see that would be a pretty. So maybe that's our next goal. Let's go through America and
That's
just
right.
get gift of good, a little lunch break for teachers. That would be, I could get
I
behind
love that.
that. Yeah, for sure. So you kind of touched on COVID, and we all know what it is, and you've seen a lot of teachers that really, it almost feels like we've kind of a little bit broke them. I happen to have several nurses in my life, and I've always was impressed with them, how what they can do. There, several of them actually work in a really intense children hospitals and NICU and things like that. And out of the four I know, three just changed jobs recently. Like they literally reached the I no longer can, right? So we all kind of got the break from the COVID, but and now we feel like, oh, it's over, it's fine. But there are still lingering issues. And so what I have seen when it comes to kids, I have two. My younger one seems to, she kind of rebounded really easy, no big deal. But my 13, 14, now 15-year-old, and really him, and also kind of his friends in the class, and even talking to the counselors, there is just an incredible amount of anxiety and depression. Just increase is just doesn't compare, right? Like they were just sort of maybe like the most sensitive group, already being the teenagers, all the hormones, the brain rewiring, they're already so awkward and so much is happening, in the world that they don't understand. And then you do this, right? You kind of remove them from the social aspect on all of this. So now they're back. And I feel like I can see like even my boys kind of coming back. But how you as the one that really understands the brain and also how brain can repair itself, talk to us a little bit about what are the environmental needs and space, and what the space can do to kind of really facilitate this happening. To really for it to get better, not actually add on to what's already not functioning properly.
Well, like you said, you've got a few factors in there that we need to consider. Number one, our brain typically operates in what we call the resilient zone. So it's able, a little bit of stress is not bad. We need to pressure ourselves a little bit. We need to recover from that. And our brain might have just a little wave, if you kind of imagine a wave of ups and downs, but your
Yeah.
brain's able to kind of control that, and that's what we call that resilient zone. It's really that way that your brain just goes, okay, you know what, I dealt with that, I'm back. Or maybe I'm a little
I was
sad or upset.
quiet and
Yeah, those ebbs and
mhm.
flows, right? Well, what happens
Right.
during big trauma, and if you think about it, a lot of the research out there is saying 98% of all children worldwide experience trauma during COVID. The
Oh my gosh.
isolation of
Hmm.
being on your own in and of itself can be a traumatic event, right? Well, when you're in
Yeah.
trauma, instead of having that little wonderful controlled zone, you have really extreme ups and downs. So if you think about a student who maybe had a lack of food access, or their parent is one of those nurses like you talked about, one of those workers that
Always gone, or when they come, they're
exactly.
understressed, they
Yes.
can't give it.
And
Yep,
they
yep,
had to work. Our nurses, our
yep.
frontline workers, we heard so much during COVID about those frontline workers. You know, Maybe they couldn't help me with my work, or they couldn't help me get online or get my camera to work, like all of us experience
I know.
camera issues. And what happens is when you have that constant extreme, your brain has a little bit of a harder time bringing that brain back in. So,
Mm,
on top of that, then you layer in the students that are at those transitional ages, like your son. We've got those
mhm,
kids who are coming into school who maybe started kindergarten during the first year of isolation and online learning. You've got the kids that are finishing up like that fourth, fifth grade, that eighth grade transition or starting high school.
mhm,
Well, what happens is if you think about when you go into those transitional times, you're learning habits, you're learning
mhm.
routines, you're learning how do I act as a freshman in high school? How do I act as the big kid on campus as an eighth grader? Well, if you take that out and they become online, that student becomes very autonomous. They go where they need to learn. That's one thing I think our environments can do just so beautifully if we just tweak here and there those little bits and pieces. You and I've talked about how our kids both learned during COVID. My daughter was on the couch, on the floor. She'd lay on her bed. She'd sit at that beautiful desk that I got her in this great ergonomic chair. But sometimes she needed to be outside. She needed to
Mhm.
be, I tell everybody, I tease her all the time that sometimes she even did online class sitting in the hot tub because she felt like that's what she needed at the time. And I think that's
Yeah.
the thing.
You won't let me have my friends.
Yes,
You won't let me leave the house.
yes,
I at least have a hot tub.
absolutely. I think
Right.
the thing that really screams about this generation
Mhm.
of kids, Generation Z, Generation Alpha, those kiddos became very autonomous. They know what they need to learn. So now they're being more vocal. So if a student
Mhm.
needs, like that one student who came in to, sit in that beautiful structure, he said to me at the end, he said, "Can I come back after class because I might need a little break." He knew that. He didn't even know
It's so
me, which was even funnier. But he knew what that provided him. So what we need to really watch for is that, it becomes an ecosystem. It becomes just all of those pieces and parts. There's no magic bullet in education. Sometimes,
yeah. You know, that's really interesting, which I haven't thought about. That we hear a lot in people returning back to workforce that workers are much more vocal
yes,
of what they need,
yeah,
right? Split time, much more much more flexibility and things like that. So it's really interesting that the kiddos, have learned a
oh
few
yeah,
other environments and different ways to do things, and there's some of it that they'd like to bring in, right, with them.
mhm,
Like, oh, this worked for me. I need a focus time,
right.
or I need really silence time, and I need this or that, and that they know to speak about it. I absolutely like it. I hope we don't ignore it. I hope we kind of actually take it as an opportunity to learn and do some interesting things, right? And really start trying to serve everyone as if they were the same. You mentioned alpha generation, and I didn't even know that there even is an alpha generation. And before we started, I told Sue Ann, I'm like, Sue Ann, for the parents out there, we have to tell them about alpha generation because I had no idea. This is sort of, anytime you talk about generation, I always kind of first think about that kind of the old man, like, oh, the kids today. And really, what that really means is, to me, is just like you don't understand them, right? You don't understand them, and you wish they were the same. They aren't. They actually grew up, like, if I compare how my kids are growing up versus how I grew up, it's night and day, right? And so you gave me this list. I still have it. I absolutely love it. And honestly, some are like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But there were several of them there I was really, really surprised. One that didn't surprise me that it's on there, but that it's as short as it is, it's the attention span. Down to 9 seconds. Parents out there, that's why your kids are not cleaning their rooms because you talk for longer than 9 seconds. They turn you off. So no, so there's that, but there's also some other ones like independence, and also that they are really, which I love, they really think of themselves just because they were exposed, sort of like the global citizen, right? Like sort of, and I'm like, that's right. My kiddo is playing some game and counts, and it's like my friend Yokido. I'm like, how do you know Yokido? Oh, I'm like, he's in Japan, but he has trouble sleeping. So I'm like, it's just like this. I mean, it's things obviously you and I never were exposed to, right? So like that kind of completely different socializing. So can you tell us a little more in a nutshell, kind of what makes this generation alpha tick, how you feel we can support them the best? They are our future, and like just like let's try to understand them a little better.
Well, first and foremost, you are so right about every generation has the generation before them saying, "Oh my gosh, this group of kids." They said it if you look all the way back to when Elvis Presley came on the scene. Parents before was they were like, "Oh my gosh, what is this guy doing?" Right? Every generation has their issues from the generation
Yes.
before. But this generation, you're right, is so very unique. You know, Generation Z, Generation Alpha were those first kiddos who really were born with that iPad in their hand. They understood technology from the very beginning as a tool. You know, this group of kids, the number one thing they watch is they're watching things like YouTube TV and YouTube itself. Not even just TV, but YouTube. They're watching TikTok. You know, we all know the TikTok generation, right? They're
Mhm.
very integrated with that technology. And you're so right. They're so worldly in that they know they can immediately get on and get information. And I always tell teachers to think about this as a difference. Years ago and many generations ago, not too far back, but we were really taught to be kind of that giver of content. So what we would
Mhm.
do is we would talk about, for example, I'm going to give everybody in your audience a little task. So without any use of technology, I want you to think to yourself, who are United States presidents 11 through 15? Okay, so everybody's thinking for a second. Very few people can actually rattle that off. I've had a couple, but not many.
We got an F.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, how about if I give you a different task? The task I want everybody to think about now is not that it's just about recall, it's about what do I do with information. So let's utilize technology. So for all your listeners, I want you to think about who are those presidents again. Now look it up. So we all know we're
Mhm.
going to grab that little, I've got my iPad sitting right here. So I've got that iPad. I can grab that, find that information. The next task that I would give a group of high schoolers might be this. It might be, you know what? I'm going to divide you up in 5 groups. I want you and your group to research and pull out the pros and the cons of that presidency. Then we're going to have a debate and you're going to
Mhm.
present your information in whatever way your team feels is a great way to present. Whether it's a poster, a PowerPoint, a TikTok video. I mean, it could be anything, right? You're going to present
Yeah.
your side, and then we're going to decide together who, by analyzing and synthesizing information, who is the strongest president out of those 5, maybe who had
Mhm.
concerns. Then I
Mhm.
might even take it another step and say, now apply those pros into today's society. Now, what's the next layer? How would they have dealt with COVID had they had this happen, back then? So it's really about, it's less paper pencil, it's more online. But I don't ever want to see it. I love a book. I love the smell of an old book.
You-
I love the feel of a book. So, it's really not necessarily about getting rid of books. It's about how do I
Mhm.
integrate it well? How do I give my
Yeah.
brain time? Um,
Mhm.
it's, inquiry based. It's about skills, not just content. It's about really understanding that this generation has an innovative mindset. They really,
Right.
really want to be innovators. They want to do things differently.
Differently and try things.
I
Yeah, I was just thinking like, oh, can Sue Ann just be my kid's teacher? Because what you said, I absolutely love. And here's why: is if you speak to folks that really like think about teach about teaching, they always say the most important thing you're trying to give to kids is to teach them how to learn
agree.
and create critical thinking, right? So it's not about, just like you said before, there's only few sources where you could go get the information, right? You would go to a library, you would read the book, or your teacher would give it to you. Now there's a shortcut for
Mhm.
this, right? So we can think of it as an advantage, right? Where it's like everybody can literally in few types get the just the what year, blah blah blah, right? So then we can spend more time on the let's find the information, let's know how to find information, let's know how to digest all the different information, and then use your viewpoint and your angle
Right.
to critically discuss why this is this or why is that, or maybe even why maybe history books got it wrong, right? Because you found some other things, and if you layer it through our 2 days lens, it comes
Absolutely.
across as a little different. I think that is absolutely amazing,
Well,
you know.
and
But
I would say, Slavi,
mm,
don't, there are people that will go, wait, wait, wait. There have to be some things that are memorized. Yes, 100%. You need to know your addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, basic facts. You have to be able to read fluently, because what those things do is they open doors. So there are
okay,
some
you have,
things you have to know, and you have to know that you know
yeah,
them. But then there are
yeah.
some things that you can really look up, and it is about how you are.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, I grew up in then communist Czechoslovakia. So my party trick to this day is I can do fractions in my brain, and it's my party tricks. I don't need it, but guess what? People are impressed. So
Good.
there, so sometimes memorization isn't that bad,
Right.
right? But it's what you do with the information. As I told you guys at the beginning, Sue and I, we can go on forever and
Yes.
ever. I am sure we're our time. I'm sure our editors will be like, cut it off. So let me wrap it up right here. One final thing I want to tell you guys. If you guys enjoyed this, this was just literally a snippet of everything that is in Sue Ann's bag of tricks and just her incredible knowledge. So what I want to let you guys know, we have spent some time and we built a course, 1 hour long course that delves into these pieces in much more depth. The premiere of it will be on November 2nd at Ed Spaces trade show. So we're really excited to actually do it in front of a live audience. We're really excited about it. And we actually did show it to AIA, and they were really excited about it. So they actually got it approved for a CEU HSW course, which we'll make available after November. So if you like this conversation, if you find it useful, if you work in schools or you design for schools and you kind of just want to know a little more about why, because it helps you explain to your customer, to the end user, here's why I'm suggesting this or that. I believe this will work for you, and here's why. Please find that information. Would love for you to join us. Thank you so much for your time, Sue Ann. Absolutely appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll talk soon. And thank you guys, all of you, for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.